You don't build the ability to be present with difficulty by avoiding difficulty. You don't build resilience by choosing comfort every time things get hard. And you don't build capacity by treating every uncomfortable feeling as a sign that something is wrong, because that's just not true. But that's what we're being told, either explicitly or more subtly by the culture. So I want to challenge something again about what wellness culture has been telling us. That self-care is really all about being gentle with yourself, resting more, doing less, choosing comfort. And I am not against rest, and I'm certainly not against being gentle with ourselves and others. I think that's so important. But I think we've also confused as a culture self-care with self-soothing. And there's a massive difference. And luckily, there's more research and more people coming out and talking about something that I think cuts to the heart of this matter. And that's that discipline can actually be the deepest form of self-care. Discipline. Not bubble baths, not face masks, not taking the time off or escaping when things get hard. Now, before you think that I'm going to tell you that this whole culture of pushing harder and being tougher and grinding through is where I'm going, that's not at all where I'm going. Because the discipline that I'm talking about isn't about force or willpower or grinding through. It's about building the capacity that I always talk about and a self-confidence to choose the hard thing that serves your future self and your present self, even when you want to choose comfort. And that's what we're talking about today. Because through all of my work, you know that I've come to believe that the most self-compassionate thing you can do is actually develop discipline and discernment, not as punishment, but as your own infrastructure. So here's what I'm seeing in wellness culture right now, and in the culture in general to a certain degree. We have completely pathologized discomfort. So anytime we feel stressed or anxious or even uncertain or uncomfortable, the message is that's bad and we need to escape. You need to rest, you need to check out, you need to check your phone. And sometimes we do need to rest. Sometimes we are depleted and we need to pull back, and we are pushing too hard and we need to reset. But sometimes discomfort is actually growth. And sometimes stress is just challenge. And sometimes the hard thing is exactly what you need to build capacity. So we can see this in the context of physical training. You don't build muscle by staying comfortable. You build it by applying the right kinds of stress, not the chronic stress that breaks you down, but acute stress and hormetic stress, which we'll talk about, that actually can make you stronger. And here's what I've learned from both my meditation training and also my field work overseas. And this is true for mental, emotional, and spiritual capacity too. You don't build the ability to be present with difficulty by avoiding difficulty. You don't build resilience by choosing comfort every time things get hard. And you don't build capacity by treating every uncomfortable feeling as a sign that something's wrong, because that's just not true. But that's what we're being told, either explicitly or more subtly by the culture. They'll listen to your body, honor your needs, rest is productive, you don't need to do anything that doesn't feel good. Yes, of course, there's a place for that. But what if constantly doing that actually kept us more fragile than we truly are? And one of true self-care is not protecting ourselves from discomfort, because honestly, that's impossible, but building the capacity to work with it skillfully. And I see this all the time. And as someone who is a historical discomfort avoider, someone that was so vigilant about their stress levels, so careful about their nervous systems, I realized that the more I tried to control my anxiety and my avoidance, the smaller my world got. And it wasn't until I started to lean into the places that challenged me and sometimes scared me that I really started to grow. So here's where this work becomes really important, because there's a difference between threat and challenge, and you need to know which one you're in. So most of us have been taught about stress responses as binary. So fight or flight, or fight, flight, freeze. I'm either stressed or I'm calm. And when your sympathetic nervous system activates, your heart rate increases, your cortisol spikes, and that's bad. And you need to get calm as quickly as possible to reverse it. But research now shows us that there's an alternative stress response. And some of you might have heard about this. And understanding this really completely reframes how you think about your body's signals. First of all, your body responds with some level of stress response, not only to threat, but also opportunity. And that's something to really look at. So something that looks a little bit more like excitement also can look like our stress response. So not all stress activation is the same. There's threat. This is fight or flight. This is your body perceiving danger. This is the stress we should manage and regulate. We do not want to be in that all the time. It is chronic, it's depleting, and it's harmful over time. But there's also the challenge response. And this is the one I want you to hear this. This is when your body mobilizes energy to meet a demand or an opportunity, like I just was talking about. So your heart rate is still increasing, your blood vessels are staying open, you get a surge of energy and focus and confidence. This is hormetic stress. This is a type of stress that can build capacity. And here's what's crucial though. Your body's physiological response can look almost identical. So you have your heart rate speeding up, you have the adrenaline, you have the increased arousal, but the effect on the system is different because the threat response depletes you and the challenge response strengthens you. So the question then becomes, in the moment, am I feeling stress? What am I feeling? What kind of stress am I in? So if we become more in tune with our bodies and understand what's actually going on, this is a part of that discipline becoming self-care. So when you're facing something hard, let's say in your daily meditation practice, you sit down, your mind immediately starts telling you all the things that you should be doing instead of actually sitting there. You start to feel restless, uncomfortable, like you're wasting time, right? Really common. So you have two options. The first option is to listen to that discomfort and just stop. You get up immediately, do something easier, and that might feel good in the moment, but it's actually training your nervous system to interpret discomfort as danger. And a lot of this goes back to early childhood programming. That's a topic for another day. But the other way that we can respond is recognizing this as the challenge response, not the threat response. So we notice this discomfort, we acknowledge it, but we choose to stay. Not by forcing, not by grinding through, but by recognizing this discomfort is not danger. It's just the feeling of building something new. So this is the discipline that I'm talking about. It's the deepest form of self-care because you're training your nervous system to tolerate and eventually thrive even when situations are challenging. Now, here's what's critical to understand. This actually only works if you're in challenge mode, not threat mode. You can't discipline your way out of actual nervous system dysregulation. You can't willpower your way out of a trauma response. You can't just push through when your body is genuinely in threat mode. That's not discipline. That is actually self-harm. So how do we know the difference? This is different for anyone, but typically the threat response feels like overwhelming anxiety, panic, collapse, or completely numbing out. That one I relate to. The sense that you literally cannot do this. And we start to recognize when we just can't do it. The challenge response, on the other hand, feels like discomfort, but you can breathe. Resistance, but you can stay present with it. Acknowledging that I don't want to do this, but I can do this. And it can be energizing and mobilizing, not depleting. So the threat response needs regulation. It needs safety. It needs nervous system support. The challenge response needs that discipline that I'm talking about. And what's happened is that most of us have lost the ability to distinguish between them. And that is where we have so much generalized anxiety. And we can start to work with this in more productive ways in order to start regulating everything about our lives. So, what does discipline actually look like? It's not forcing, it's not grinding, it's not pushing through everything. Discipline has this quality of discernment, and this is just so beautiful. It's knowing, when do I actually need rest and when do I need challenge? Because both are true. Sometimes you genuinely need to stop. Like rest, regulate, restore, those are so important. But sometimes you need to stay. You need to practice, you need to tolerate discomfort, and you need to build capacity. So I can give you an example from my own practice. Every morning, I try to do it every morning. I sit and I meditate. I try to meditate for at least 15 minutes, not that long, but not because I feel like it every morning. I certainly don't. And it's certainly not because I'm trying to seek some peaceful experience, because that doesn't always happen. But I sit because I've made a commitment to myself, and I never, ever regret my practice. So I've made this commitment to both my present self and my future self that I will build this capacity. And some days meditation, it sucks. It's hard. My mind is noisy. I'm restless. I'd rather be doing literally anything else. And every part of me just wants to get up. Sometimes I do, I'll be honest. But this is where the discipline comes in. And more times than not, it's not force, it's not just pushing through, but I'm able to recognize the choice that this discomfort is not dangerous. It's just my resistance coming up. And I can be present with that resistance. And after I meditate for a while, the choice to stay when you still want to leave, it becomes easier. It becomes easier to stay. And the same is true for movement or community building or creativity. Typically in the morning, my body doesn't really want to move. It would be easier to like skip the gym or skip the walk or skip the run. But I never regret my morning runs, ever. So if you have the choice, you can listen to the resistance and you can ask yourself, is this the truth, or is this just my habitual mind kind of pressing up against something new that I'm trying to build? When you choose to move anyway, not from punishment, but from commitment to your capacity, that's a discipline as self-care. And this applies to our communities as well. You know, I talk a lot about what we're doing at the Groundwork Collective, not as just individual self-care, but as something that the world desperately needs right now. So showing up for your friends, for your family, when you'd rather isolate, being honest when it would be easier to be performative, asking for help when you'd rather manage things on your own. All of this is uncomfortable. Being with community is uncomfortable. And your nervous system will tell you, just skip the call. You don't need their help. You can handle it yourself. You just don't need to deal with that difficult conversation, right? That's what we tell ourselves a lot. But if we listen to that every time, we train ourselves into isolation. And that is not what our world needs. So discipline is showing up to, even when it's uncomfortable. That is also our self-care, because humans cannot build this capacity on their own. So I want to pause. I know this is a lot, but invite you to reflect a little bit on something. So, where in your life have you been choosing comfort over capacity? Not rest when you're genuinely depleted, but comfort when you're actually in challenge mode. We're just noticing it. We're not judging it. We're just becoming aware, because that awareness is one of the first steps to actually building that discipline is self-care. Okay, a couple things before we wrap up. Here's what I want you to understand. Discipline isn't about being tough. It's not. It's not about ignoring your needs. It's not about pushing through everything, and ignoring everything that your body is telling you. Discipline is about building the discernment to know, what do I need right now? It is learning to listen to our intuition wisely, which is really difficult and also requires building that relationship with your intuition. But as you develop this discernment through small daily practices, not dramatic transformations, right? We're not going to get this 100% right tomorrow, but small daily practices get us closer to where we need to be. So sitting for 10 minutes, even when you don't feel like it, going for that walk, even when it's raining or cold, showing up for your people, even when you'd rather isolate, engaging your creative practice, even when you don't feel inspired. It's not glamorous. I say that all the time, but it's real. And these small steps last. Because the most self-compassionate thing that I've ever done is develop the discipline to do the hard things that serve not only my future self, but me right now in this moment. Not necessarily perfectly, not without resistance, but consistently. So it's not about being mean to myself. This is loving my future self enough to build the groundwork now, because I know something. The future needs people who have this capacity to do hard things, not because they're tough, but because they've practiced the contemplation and the discipline that makes that sustained contribution to our world possible. So here's what I would love to leave you with today. If you've been on this treadmill of self-care as only rest, as only comfort, as only gentleness, that's okay. But just look at how you've also been treating every uncomfortable feeling, maybe as a sign that something's wrong. And have we lost the ability to do hard things because we've kind of trained ourselves to interpret every discomfort as danger? Once again, it's not your fault. We're just getting incomplete information, because we see now that true self-care does require discipline. But it's the discipline to choose challenge when your nervous system is ready for it. The discipline to build capacity instead of managing symptoms, and the discipline to stay with discomfort that's growth, not threat. This allows us not to become stagnant. This allows us to build those small daily practices, not because we're going to feel good in 24 hours, but because over the long term, they work. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned. Next week, we'll be talking about why you actually do not need a routine. You need to build an ecosystem. But until then, keep building that groundwork. See you next time.